The clatter of plates, the low hum of conversations, and the smell of sizzling bacon filled the tiny diner on the corner of 7th Avenue. It was just another cold, gray morning until a man, ragged and broken, staggered inside, and one small act of kindness set off a chain of events no one could have foreseen. By the time the sun would set, lives would be changed forever, and a devastating truth would come crashing into the open. Rachel Evans tightened her apron and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She'd been working double shifts for weeks now, saving every tip to cover her mother's medical bills. At 24, Rachel knew life wasn't fair. She knew the world didn't hand out kindness easily, but she believed, stubbornly, quietly, that kindness was still worth giving. Her boss, Mr. Bennett, didn't believe in such things. The owner of the diner for over 20 years, Bennett was known for his sharp tongue and sharper temper. To him, customers were dollar signs. Anyone who didn't look like they could pay wasn't welcome. Rachel tried to stay out of his way, focused on her job, grateful for the paycheck, however small and bitter it tasted. The bell above the door jingled weakly as the man stepped inside. Heads turned, conversations halted. Even the sizzling from the kitchen seemed to pause for a heartbeat. The man was filthy, his clothes torn and stained. His hands shook as he clutched a battered beanie against his chest. His eyes, hollow and red-rimmed, scanned the room as if searching for an anchor. Rachel's heart squeezed painfully. She moved instinctively toward him, but before she could reach him, Mr. Bennett barked across the counter, "Out! We don't serve beggars here." The man flinched like he'd been struck. Rachel hesitated, glancing at the customers, some smirking, others averting their eyes. The man's shoulders slumped. He turned slowly toward the door. Rachel couldn't bear it. "Wait," she said softly, moving past Mr. Bennett. "Sit, please." The homeless man blinked at her, disbelief flickering across his weathered face. Rachel guided him gently to a booth in the corner and poured him a cup of steaming coffee, the first real warmth he'd felt in days. The moment Rachel set the coffee down, Mr. Bennett stormed over, his face purple with rage. "What do you think you're doing?" he hissed, towering over her. "He's just a man," Rachel said, her voice shaking but firm. "He's cold. He's hungry." Bennett's voice was a razor's edge. "You want to feed the garbage off the streets? You can join them." Rachel's breath caught. "Sir, you're fired," Bennett spat. "Get out, now." The diner fell into stunned silence. Rachel stared at him, heart pounding in her ears, then glanced at the homeless man, whose hand trembled as he tried to sip the coffee she had given him. Without a word, Rachel untied her apron and laid it on the counter. No one clapped. No one protested. They simply watched her walk away. Outside, the biting wind whipped at Rachel's jacket. She sank onto the curb, hands trembling. No job, no savings, no backup plan. All because she refused to look away from a man everyone else pretended not to see. She wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. The homeless man shuffled out moments later, cradling the coffee cup like a treasure. He knelt beside her awkwardly. "I'm sorry," he rasped. Rachel shook her head. "Don't be." He hesitated, then pulled something from his coat, a small, battered wallet. Inside was a photo of a younger man smiling broadly in a police uniform. "My name's Henry," he said hoarsely. "I used to be somebody." Rachel listened as Henry shared his story. Years ago, he was a decorated police officer. One night, he responded to a robbery. Shots fired, Henry was hit, and while recovering, he developed a dependency on painkillers. Addiction led to job loss, divorce, homelessness. "I lost everything," he whispered, voice cracking, "all because I was weak." Rachel's heart broke anew. "You're not weak," she said fiercely. "You're still here." Henry's lip trembled. No one had spoken to him like a human being in years. As they sat there, a sleek black car pulled up beside the curb. A man in a tailored suit stepped out, scanning the street before locking eyes with Henry. Rachel tensed. The man approached cautiously. "Henry Walker?" Henry stiffened. "Who's asking?" The man extended a card. "Jonathan Price, legal representative for the Walker Family Trust." Henry's brow furrowed. "Walker family?" Jonathan smiled kindly. "You have an inheritance, sir. Your estranged brother passed away last month. He left everything to you." Rachel's mouth fell open. Henry blinked, stunned. I don't understand." "Your brother searched for you for years," Jonathan said. "He never gave up. And now, you're the sole heir." Before Henry could process the shock, Jonathan added, "There's a lot to discuss. You're a very wealthy man now, Mr. Walker." Henry stared at the coffee in his hands, a gift given when he had nothing to offer in return, and then at Rachel, the only person who had treated him with dignity. Rachel managed a small, teary smile. But just as hope began to flicker, a dark car, tinted windows rolled slowly to a stop across the street. Inside, a figure watched them carefully. Jonathan's smile faltered. He turned to Rachel and Henry, voice low and urgent. "We need to leave now. There are people who don't want Henry to claim what's rightfully his." Rachel's heart raced. Henry looked at her, fear dawning in his tired eyes. The wind howled around them. The car door across the street creaked open. The heavy clouds rolled over the city skyline as Rachel, Henry, and Jonathan hurried down the street. Every step sounded louder, heavier. The black car idled behind them, its engine a low growl in the cold air. "We need to go somewhere safe," Jonathan hissed under his breath. "Now." Henry stumbled, clutching Rachel's arm, his legs, stiff from months of living on the streets, barely carry him forward. Rachel's heart hammered against her ribs. "Where do we go?" she gasped. Jonathan looked around wildly, then spotted a nearby parking garage. "This way." They slipped inside the dimly lit garage, their shadows dancing across the concrete walls. Behind them, footsteps echoed. Heavy, deliberate. Rachel pulled Henry along, ducking behind a column. She dared a glance over her shoulder. A tall figure emerged from the stairwell, dressed in black, with a cold, expressionless face. Not police. Not someone sent to help. Jonathan pressed a finger to his lips. "Stay quiet." The figure scanned the garage, phone pressed to his ear, murmuring something Rachel couldn't hear. Then suddenly the figure moved fast, heading straight toward where they were hiding. Rachel squeezed Henry's hand, praying he wouldn't make a sound. The figure passed by, mere feet away, before disappearing into the lower levels. Jonathan let out a shaky breath. "We can't stay here. They'll find us." He pulled out a set of keys. "My car's 3 blocks down. Can you make it?" Henry nodded weakly. Rachel helped him up. Under the cover of darkness, they slipped away from the garage and into the narrow alleyways. An hour later, they huddled in a cramped motel room. The heater rattled weakly. Rain battered the cracked window panes. Jonathan paced the room, running a hand through his hair. "They're serious about this. Henry, your brother's company, it's worth millions. You are supposed to inherit it all." Henry blinked, still processing. "Why would they care if I take what's mine?" Jonathan's eyes darkened. "Because if you're declared dead, they split the estate among the shareholders. Some of them are very powerful and very dangerous." Rachel wrapped a blanket around Henry's shoulders. "So what do we do?" she asked. Jonathan paused, choosing his words carefully. "We need to prove you're still alive, publicly. In a way they can't cover up." Jonathan revealed his plan. They would hold a press conference, bring Henry's story to the media. Once the public knew who he was, it would be harder for the enemies to silence him without attracting attention. But there was a catch. They had to survive long enough to make it to the press. Rachel agreed without hesitation. She had lost her job. She had nothing left to lose. Henry, hesitant and terrified, finally nodded. "If it means getting my life back, I'll do it." Jonathan smiled grimly. "Then we start tomorrow." That night, Rachel sat with Henry on the edge of the motel bed. "Why did you help me?" Henry asked, voice rough. Rachel shrugged. "Because someone once helped me, when I had nothing." She didn't elaborate, but Henry saw the flicker of pain behind her eyes. "You're a good person," Henry said quietly. "There aren't many like you left." Rachel smiled sadly. "Maybe there could be, if we all just tried." Outside, the rain softened to a drizzle. For the first time in years, Henry allowed himself to believe in something he had long forgotten, but hope was a fragile thing. The next morning, as they prepared to leave for the press conference, Jonathan stepped outside to check the car. Seconds later, Rachel heard a loud crash. She raced outside to find the windshield smashed, tires slashed, and a message scrawled in red paint across the hood, "Stay dead." Rachel's blood ran cold. Henry stared, heart thudding in terror. Jonathan's face tightened. "They found us." They needed another car fast. Jonathan made some calls, and an old friend agreed to lend them a vehicle. Rachel felt uneasy about it. Everything seemed too convenient. Too easy. When they met the friend, a man named Carter, her instincts screamed louder. He was too nervous, too eager. As Carter handed over the keys, Rachel caught sight of something, a glint of metal under his jacket. A gun. She grabbed Henry's arm and whispered, "Trap." Henry froze. Carter smiled too widely. "Going somewhere?" he drawled. Behind them, more black cars rolled up. Jonathan realized it too late. He pushed Rachel and Henry toward the alley, shouting, Run! Shots rang out, the crack of bullets splitting the morning air. Rachel's heart pounded as she and Henry sprinted into the maze of alleys. Behind them, Carter's voice echoed. You can't run from the past, Henry. You were supposed to disappear. They turned a corner only to find two more men blocking their way. Trapped. Outnumbered. Breathless, terrified, Rachel squeezed Henry's hand. And then from the rooftop above, a shadow moved. Someone else was watching. Someone they hadn't accounted for. The figure raised a phone and spoke into it. Target acquired! Awaiting orders! The screen fades to black. The cold wind cut through the narrow alley as Rachel and Henry stood frozen. Two men in black suits blocked their only exit. Behind them, Carter smirked. Gun drawn. Rachel tightened her grip on Henry's trembling hand. We're not going back, she whispered. Henry's voice was barely a breath. Then what do we do? Rachel scanned the alley desperately. The figure on the rooftop was still there, watching, waiting. Suddenly, one of the suited men barked, "Hand him over and no one gets hurt." Rachel swallowed her fear. Her mother had once told her, true strength isn't the absence of fear, it's standing up despite it. She squared her shoulders. Over my dead body. Carter laughed cruelly. That can be arranged. The first man lunged forward, but before he could reach them, a shot rang out from above. Crack! The man cried out, clutching his arm. Rachel gasped, looking up. The figure on the rooftop had a sniper rifle, and he wasn't shooting at them. He was protecting them. Go! A voice bellowed from the rooftop. Rachel didn't hesitate. Dragging Henry, she dashed into the maze of alleys, heart thundering in her chest. Bullets ricocheted off brick walls as Carter's men fired blindly. Rachel ducked behind dumpsters, weaving through narrow gaps, never letting go of Henry's hand. Behind them, the rooftop sniper provided cover fire, forcing the attackers back. Finally, they stumbled into a side street. A black motorcycle roared to a stop in front of them. The rider wearing a helmet tossed Rachel a second helmet. Get on, the rider barked. Rachel didn't ask questions. She helped Henry onto the back, climbed on herself, and clung tightly as the motorcycle tore away into the night. An hour later, they reached a hidden warehouse on the edge of town. Inside, the mysterious rider pulled off his helmet. Rachel gasped. It was a woman, mid-30s, sharp-eyed, wearing tactical gear. Name's Morgan, she said. I work for someone who wants to see you survive. Henry collapsed onto a nearby bench, breathing heavily. Rachel's voice shook. Who are you really? Morgan tossed her a file. Inside were surveillance photos, old court documents, and something else. A photo of Henry and a woman, a younger version of Henry, standing beside a luxurious mansion. My mother, Henry whispered, tracing the photo. Morgan nodded grimly. Your family's wealth wasn't just money, it was power, and power breeds enemies. Morgan explained everything. After Henry disappeared years ago, the estate trustees divided his family's assets. But one group wanted it all and orchestrated a plan to erase Henry permanently. Fake death certificates, forged police reports, paid-off officials. It was a cover-up, years in the making. And Carter? He wasn't just a hired thug. He was connected to Henry's own cousin, someone who had everything to lose if Henry reclaimed his inheritance. Rachel's fists clenched. They tried to kill him for money. Morgan nodded. And they won't stop now. Later that night, as Henry slept fitfully on an old mattress, Rachel sat alone with Morgan. I shouldn't have dragged him into this, Rachel whispered, tears stinging her eyes. Morgan shook her head. You didn't drag him anywhere. You reminded him he deserves better. Rachel's voice cracked. But what if he doesn't survive it? Morgan leaned forward, her voice low and steady. Then we make damn sure he does. The next morning, Morgan laid out the plan. We leak Henry's story to the media. Real photos, DNA proof, everything. But we can't send it from here. They're tracking every phone, every device. Rachel frowned. Then how? Morgan smirked. We break into the Walker estate, use their own secure servers against them. Rachel's stomach twisted. The Walker estate, Henry's childhood home, was now a fortress owned by the very people who wanted him dead. Breaking in was suicide, but it was the only chance. Henry, hearing it all, simply nodded. I'm not running anymore, he said. The day passed in a blur of preparation. Morgan trained Rachel and Henry in basic evasion tactics. They studied blueprints of the estate. They timed the guards' rotations. Every second counted. Rachel caught Henry staring at the old photo again, him and his mother smiling. She sat beside him. You okay? She asked softly. Henry wiped his eyes. I spent so long thinking I didn't deserve to be found, he whispered. Maybe it's time I find myself. Rachel squeezed his hand.
You're not alone anymore.
Night fell like a heavy curtain. Under the cover of darkness, Rachel, Henry, and Morgan crept toward the Walker estate. Massive gates loomed ahead, lined with security cameras and armed guards. Morgan disabled the alarms expertly. They slipped inside. Rachel's heart raced with every step. Inside, the mansion was a museum of cold, polished marble and expensive silence. They moved quickly toward the study, the one place the servers were hidden. Rachel whispered, "How much time do we have?" Morgan checked her watch. 10 minutes if we're lucky. As they entered the study, Henry froze. At the massive oak desk sat a woman, poised, elegant, sipping a glass of wine. She smiled coldly. "Hello, Henry." Rachel's stomach dropped. Morgan cursed under her breath. The woman set down her glass. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Henry's voice shook. Aunt Eleanor, his mother's sister, the woman who had led the efforts to claim Henry's inheritance. The real mastermind. "You made this harder than it had to be," Eleanor said, standing gracefully. "You could have died quietly, forgotten. Instead, you chose chaos." Henry's fists clenched. "You stole everything." Eleanor tilted her head. "I protected it from you." Rachel noticed Morgan shifting beside her, tense, ready for a fight. But Eleanor simply smiled and pressed a button under the desk. Alarms blared. Doors slammed shut. Lights flashed red. They were trapped. Guards stormed the halls outside. Morgan cursed again, pulling a weapon from her jacket. Rachel grabbed Henry's hand. "This isn't over," she said fiercely. Henry nodded, determination flashing in his eyes. Eleanor's voice echoed through the room's speakers. "You wanted to reclaim your life, Henry? Come and take it, if you can survive the night." The screen fades to black. The heavy wooden doors slammed shut behind them, and red alarm lights flashed across the study walls. Rachel's heart thudded in her chest. She gripped Henry's hand tightly, sweat trickling down her back despite the cold marble floor beneath her feet. Morgan crouched low, gun drawn, eyeing the exits. "They've locked us in." Eleanor stood calmly at the other end of the room, sipping wine like a woman at peace. "You walked into this house with such confidence," she said smoothly, "but none of you realized you were exactly where I wanted you to be." Henry's jaw clenched. "This was never yours." Eleanor smiled. "Oh, darling, everything in this house is mine, and by the time the world hears your story, it'll be too late to save it." Rachel stepped forward, her voice shaking but strong. "You tried to erase Henry for money." Eleanor's laugh was delicate, cruel. "For legacy, dear. He was weak, a disappointment. And legacy should be preserved, not wasted on broken men." Henry flinched. Morgan stepped in. "We downloaded the files, the DNA tests, the sealed court documents. Even if you kill us, the evidence is already moving." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Are you so sure about that?" A screen lit up behind her, displaying a black terminal window, code scrolling fast. Remote signals intercepted. "Your upload never left the estate." Rachel's stomach dropped. Morgan cursed under her breath. "She's blocking everything." Suddenly, Morgan moved, lunging toward the side door. Rachel followed without thinking. Gunfire echoed behind them as Eleanor's men burst through the main hallway. Rachel ducked behind a stone column, dragging Henry down beside her. "We need to split up," Morgan called from across the room. "There's a passage through the wine cellar. It leads out to the stables." "I'm not leaving you," Rachel cried. "Go!" Morgan shouted. Henry clutched Rachel's hand. "She's right. We have to move." Tears welled in Rachel's eyes, but she nodded. They bolted. The wine cellar was damp, lined with rows of dust-covered bottles. Henry slowed, touching the wall. "This used to be my hiding spot," he said quietly. "When my parents fought, when Eleanor screamed at me, I'd come here." Rachel squeezed his arm. "You're not that boy anymore." But deep inside, Henry wasn't sure he believed that. Meanwhile, upstairs, Morgan fought her way through the guards, but was finally surrounded. Blood trickled from her lip, her weapon empty. Eleanor approached slowly. "You're talented," she said, "but misguided." Morgan spat on the floor. "You'll never bury him again." Eleanor leaned in. "I don't need to. By the time the world sees him, they'll believe he's insane." She turned to the guards. "Take her to the lower level," and prepped the interview room. Back in the tunnel, Rachel and Henry reached a heavy steel door. It led into an old surveillance room, still active. Dozens of screens showed live footage from around the estate, but one screen made Henry freeze. It was a feed from the lower level where Morgan was being restrained, bloodied, but alive. Rachel's eyes widened. She's still here? Henry clenched his fists. We're not leaving without her. Rachel touched a panel. What is this place? Henry answered quietly. It's where they used to question staff, and sometimes me. Rachel turned to him slowly. Henry, were you abused here? He said nothing, just stared at the screen, as silent tears rolled down his cheeks. We have to end this, Rachel said. We get Morgan. We upload everything. We shut this down. Henry nodded, but as he stepped toward the exit, a folder caught his eye. He picked it up, and the label made his breath catch. Henry Walker, Psychological Evaluation. Do not release. Rachel opened it. Inside were fabricated records, fake diagnoses, staged photos, doctored videos, all painting Henry as mentally unstable. They were going to institutionalize you, Rachel whispered. Henry's hands trembled. They still might. As they tried to exit the tunnel, the lights cut out. A voice echoed through the speakers. Eleanor, you should have stayed hidden, Henry. Now the only way out is through me. And then, the gas began to hiss from the vents. Rachel grabbed Henry's arm. Run. They burst into the next room, only to find themselves face to face with a line of guards. Outnumbered, unarmed, cornered. Rachel stepped in front of Henry. I won't let you hurt him. The guards raised their weapons. Then, a blast. The ceiling above cracked, debris falling, and someone dropped in from above. Morgan, bruised, bleeding, but alive. She fired a flash grenade, blinding the guards. Move! They escaped through the north wing past the garden, reaching the garage. Morgan shoved them into a car and peeled away down the gravel path. Where now? Rachel asked breathlessly. Morgan glanced into the rearview mirror. To someone who can expose all of this. But as they turned the corner, their headlights hit a roadblock. 3 SUVs, armed men, Eleanor's private security. And stepping out of the middle car was someone no one expected. Not Carter, not a guard, but Jonathan, the lawyer who had helped them from the beginning. Rachel gasped. You? Jonathan smiled, calm, cold, and utterly different. I told you I worked for the family, he said. I never told you which side I was on. Rain fell in cold sheets as Rachel, Henry, and Morgan sat frozen in the car, headlights shining straight into the blockade of black SUVs. Jonathan stepped forward, his smile tight and calculated. I warned you this wouldn't end well, he said, brushing a drop of rain from his sleek coat. You were never supposed to come this far. Rachel clenched her jaw. Why, Jonathan? You helped us. I guided you, he corrected, just enough to find what we needed. The files, the DNA, your story. Now we'll use it to finish what Eleanor started. Henry stared in disbelief. I trusted you. Jonathan's face twisted ever so slightly. And that was your biggest mistake. Morgan revved the engine. We can punch through the side, she said under her breath. Rachel stared at the SUV blockade. We won't make it with Henry in the back seat. But before anyone could act, Jonathan signaled his men. They raised their weapons. I won't kill you, Henry, Jonathan said. You're worth more alive. As long as the world believes you've lost your mind. Rachel's heart dropped. The fake psych files. The discrediting. They weren't going to kill Henry. They were going to erase him. Again. Suddenly, Morgan yanked the wheel left, tires screaming as the car veered off the road and down a muddy slope. Bullets shattered the rear windshield. Rachel ducked, shielding Henry's head with her body. The car bounced, slid, then crashed through a chain-link fence, landing hard in a ditch. Morgan groaned behind the wheel, smoke rising from the hood. We need to run, she gasped. Rachel helped Henry out, her heart pounding. Flashlights appeared at the top of the hill. They're coming. They scrambled into the dense woods, the sound of barking dogs and heavy boots echoing behind them. After nearly an hour of running through the cold and mud, they reached an old hunting cabin, long abandoned. They barricaded the door, lit a single oil lamp, and collapsed onto the floor. Henry coughed violently, blood on his lip. Rachel pressed a rag to his mouth. We need to get him to a hospital, she said, panic creeping into her voice. Morgan shook her head. They'll be watching every hospital. We stay here for now. Henry tried to sit up. I'm fine. You're not, Rachel snapped, tears brimming. You're not fine, Henry. They're trying to destroy you, and we keep barely staying ahead of it. His eyes softened. I never thought I mattered this much to anyone. That night, as wind howled outside and the fire crackled inside, Henry opened up. My father died when I was 10, he whispered, and Eleanor raised me like I was a burden. I was too sensitive, too soft. She said I didn't deserve the Walker name. Rachel sat beside him quietly. She was wrong, she said. He looked at her, tears in his eyes. No one's ever told me that. Rachel didn't reply. She simply held his hand. The next morning, Morgan explained her last card. I have to contact someone inside the FBI. If we can get to him and get Henry's story recorded on the record, we can force the Department of Justice to intervene. Rachel's hope flickered. But Morgan's jaw clenched. They'll be expecting us. We'd have to pass through one of Eleanor's properties to get there. She owns half the state. Rachel nodded slowly. We do it anyway. Henry's voice was steady now. They've taken everything from me already. I won't let them take what's left. Before they left, Rachel sat with Henry alone. There's something I haven't told you, she whispered. Henry looked up. I know what it feels like to be invisible. When I was 16, my dad lost everything. We lived in shelters. I worked nights and lied about my age to survive. I know what hunger feels like, what shame tastes like. Henry took her hand. You saved me, Rachel, not just in the diner, but every day since. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Then let's finish what we started. They drove quietly for hours in a stolen truck, arriving at a small airport strip behind Eleanor's old vineyard, now heavily guarded. Morgan's contact, Agent Theo Marsh, was supposed to meet them there. But when they arrived, he wasn't alone. Standing beside him, hands folded, was Carter, the traitor from before. Rachel's blood froze. Morgan raised her weapon instantly. What is this? She hissed. Agent Marsh looked pale. I had no choice. They got to my family. Henry stepped forward, trembling but defiant. Then we end it, now. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. Morgan cried out, falling to her knees. Rachel screamed, dragging her behind cover. More guards appeared from the trees, a full ambush. Henry turned to run, but a gun clicked behind him. Eleanor stood there, dressed in black, calm as ever. Hello again, Henry, she said, smiling. It's time to go home. The screen fades to black. The cold wind cut through the airstrip like a blade as Eleanor stepped forward, the gun aimed squarely at Henry's chest. Morgan groaned behind a crate, clutching her bleeding shoulder. Rachel stood frozen, her fists clenched, her eyes locked on the woman who had tormented Henry since childhood. Walk toward me, Eleanor commanded. Henry didn't move. You stole everything from me, he said, voice shaking. And now you want to erase me for good? Eleanor smiled. I didn't steal anything. I saved this family's name. You were a stain on it. Rachel took a step forward. You were supposed to protect him. You were his aunt. Eleanor's face didn't flinch. Family means nothing without power. Behind Eleanor, Carter restrained Agent Marsh, a pistol pressed to his side. Eleanor raised a hand. Here's how this ends. You get in the car, Henry. Quietly, no resistance. And in exchange, Rachel walks away alive. So does your little agent friend. Henry glanced at Rachel, his eyes filled with apology. Don't, she whispered. We'll find another way. There is no other way, Eleanor snapped. Your story ends now. The wind howled louder, like the world itself screaming for justice. But then, something unexpected happened. Carter stepped away from Agent Marsh, lowering his weapon. Enough, he muttered. Eleanor turned. What are you doing? Carter stared at Henry. He's not weak. He came back. He stood up to you. That's more than any of us ever did. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. You work for me. Not anymore. In a flash, he drew his gun and pointed at Eleanor. Let them go. Eleanor's finger twitched. A shot rang out. Carter's body jerked sideways, blood spilling as he crumpled to the ground. Morgan, despite her injury, reached for her weapon. Rachel dove to protect Henry. Gunfire erupted. The tarmac lit up with muzzle flashes and screams. Agent Marsh tackled a guard, grabbing his radio and shouting, Code Black! Walker Airfield under attack! Eleanor disappeared into the shadows. Morgan limped to the car, throwing open the door. Go, now! Rachel pulled Henry inside. Agent Marsh followed, bruised but breathing. They sped away, tires screeching on the gravel road. Inside the car, Henry shook violently. She's not going to stop, he whispered. Not until I'm gone again. Morgan gritted her teeth. Then we make her stop. Rachel turned to Agent Marsh. What do we do? He opened his bloodied briefcase. Inside was a single folder marked Project Silence, Walker Family Seal. The file revealed the truth. Eleanor had used hospital board connections to fake Henry's mental health records, bribed officials to declare him legally dead, and rerouted inheritance funds to secret accounts offshore. But worse, she had done it before. The folder contained 3 more names, heirs from other branches of the Walker family, all declared dead under mysterious circumstances. Rachel's stomach turned. This isn't just about Henry. It's about control, Marsh said. She's been doing this for decades. Morgan pressed a GPS tracker into Rachel's hand. This goes to a satellite uplink 2 towns over. We send everything, publicly, real time. Henry nodded slowly. No more hiding. Rachel stared at the horizon, where the first light of dawn was breaking. We finished this, she whispered. The car suddenly lurched. A spike strip. The tires exploded. The vehicle skidded and slammed into a ditch. Morgan gasped, clutching her side. Agent Marsh groaned. Rachel pulled Henry out of the wreck, both limping, stunned, and then a silhouette appeared through the morning fog. Eleanor, dressed in gray, holding Rachel's mother, banned, gagged, crying. Rachel's knees gave out. No. Eleanor stepped forward. You wanted war, she said calmly. Let's talk about sacrifice. She dropped a phone at Rachel's feet. Call your little contact. Tell him the broadcast is off, or your mother dies. Rachel's hands shook. Henry moved beside her, whispering, Don't do it. We're so close. Eleanor's voice was icy. Choose the truth or your family. Rachel looked at her mother, then at Henry, and slowly reached for the phone. The screen fades to black. Rain drizzled over the field as Eleanor's cold voice echoed. Call your contact, Rachel. Tell him the broadcast is off or your mother dies. Rachel's hands trembled over the phone. Henry stood beside her, bloodied but steady. Morgan lay wounded nearby, Agent Marsh unconscious behind a broken fence post. Rachel looked at her mother, bound, terrified, tears streaking her cheeks. I can't, she whispered. Eleanor stepped closer. Yes, you can. Say the words. Tell your hero friends to stand down. Rachel looked at the phone again, then at Henry. He nodded slowly. If you save her now, the truth dies forever. Rachel choked back a sob. And if I don't, I lose her. Henry's voice was low, trembling. You already saved me. Maybe that's enough. Rachel dropped the phone and raised her hands. I'll go with you. Let my mother go. Eleanor blinked. What? I'll surrender, Rachel said. Do whatever you want, just let her go. Eleanor considered this, then smiled. You always were the emotional type. She signaled her men. They grabbed Rachel roughly. Her mother screamed beneath the gag. But then, a single shot rang out. One of Eleanor's guards dropped. Then another. The tray line exploded with movement. Helicopters roared overhead. FBI agents burst through the trees, shouting commands. Federal agents, drop your weapons. Eleanor spun around, screaming orders, but it was too late. Morgan, despite her injuries, had activated the GPS Rachel slipped into Eleanor's jacket minutes earlier. Target locked, she'd whispered through a weak radio call. Chaos erupted. In moments, Eleanor was surrounded, disarmed, screaming as cuffs snapped around her wrists. Rachel broke free and rushed to her mother, cutting the ropes, pulling her close. Henry stood silently, watching Eleanor being dragged away. She looked back at him, eyes wild. This isn't over, she shrieked. But even she knew it was. Days later, Henry's story exploded across national media. News outlets aired the footage from the recovered drives, court records, bank transfers, the silenced heirs, Eleanor's decades-long abuse of power. The nation watched as a man once thrown out of a diner was revealed as the rightful heir to a legacy he never asked for, but finally reclaimed. Rachel stood beside him on every podium, and when asked how it all started, she always said the same thing, with a cup of coffee. Henry donated most of his inheritance to launch a foundation in his mother's name, supporting mental health recovery, homeless helpers, and whistleblower protection. He hired Morgan full-time to run operations. Agent Marsh recovered and testified against the corrupt officials who helped Eleanor. Rachel returned to her old neighborhood, but not to wait tables. She opened a center that trained waitresses, servers, and cashiers in financial literacy and professional development. People called her a hero, but she always said she was just someone who looked a man in the eye and refused to pretend he was invisible. Months later, on a calm spring morning, Henry stood outside that same diner, now under new ownership. He stepped inside, holding 2 coffees. Rachel sat at their favorite corner booth. You're late, she teased. He grinned. Traffic. They clinked cups together. Across the room, a young waiter helped a tired, dirty man find a seat and offered him a cup of coffee. Henry and Rachel exchanged a glance and smiled. Sometimes, the smallest act, a warm drink, a soft word, A moment of eye contact is all it takes to change a life. Rachel chose kindness when it cost her everything, and it gave her back even more. Dean, what did this story teach you? Was there a moment that made you stop and think differently about people society tries to ignore? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice might be the beginning of someone else's story. And if this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more tales that reveal the power of empathy, truth,